Chapter 2 The Second Day, Saturday, December 4th. The Red October. It was the custom in the Soviet Navy for the commanding officer to announce his ship's operational orders and to exhort the crew to carry them out in true Soviet fashion. The orders were then posted for all to see and be inspired by outside the ship's Lenin room. In large surface ships, this was a classroom where political awareness classes were held. In Red October, it was a closet-sized library near the wardroom where party books and other ideological material were kept for the men to read. Ramius disclosed their orders the day after sailing to give his men the chance to settle into the ship's routine. At the same time, he gave a pep talk. Ramius always gave a good one. He'd had a lot of practice. At 0800 hours, when the forenoon watch was set, he entered the common room and took some file cards from inside a jacket pocket. "Comrades," he began, talking into the microphone, "this is the captain speaking. You all know that our beloved friend and comrade Captain Ivan Yurievich Putin died yesterday in a tragic accident. Our orders do not permit us to inform fleet headquarters of this. Comrades, we will dedicate our efforts and our work to the memory of our comrade, Ivan Yurievich Putin, a fine shipmate, an honorable party member, and a courageous officer. Comrades, officer and men of Red October, we have orders from the Red Banner Northern Fleet High Command, and they are orders worthy of this ship and this crew. Comrades, our orders are to make the ultimate test of our new silent propulsion system. We are to head west, past the North Cape of America's imperialist puppet state, Norway, then turn southwest towards the Atlantic Ocean. We will pass all of the imperialist sonar nets, and we will not be detected. This will be a true test of our submarine and his capabilities. Our own ships will engage in a major exercise to locate us and at the same time to befuddle the arrogant imperialist navies. Our mission, first of all, is to evade detection by anyone. We will teach the Americans a lesson about Soviet technology that they will not soon forget. Our orders are to continue southwest, skirting the American coast to challenge and defeat their newest and best hunter submarines. We will proceed all the way to our socialist brothers in Cuba, and we will be the first ship to make use of a new and super-secret nuclear submarine base that we have been building for 2 years right under the imperialist noses on the south coast of Cuba. A fleet replenishment vessel is already en route to rendezvous with us there. Comrades, if we succeed in reaching Cuba undetected by the imperialists, and we will, the officers and men of Red October will have a week of shore leave to visit our fraternal socialist comrades on the beautiful island of Cuba. I have been there, comrades, and you will find it to be exactly what you have read. A paradise of warm breezes, palm trees, and comradely good fellowship. By which Ramius meant women. After this we will return to the motherland by the same route. By this time, of course, the imperialists will know who and what we are from their slinking spies and cowardly reconnaissance aircraft. It is intended that they should know this because we will again evade detection on the trip home. This will let the imperialists know that they may not trifle with the men of the Soviet Navy, that we can approach their coast at the time of our choosing, and that they must respect the Soviet Union. Comrades, we will make the first cruise of Red October a memorable one." Ramius looked up from his prepared speech. The men on watch in the control room were exchanging grins. It was not often that a Soviet sailor was allowed to visit another country, and a visit by a nuclear submarine to a foreign country, even an ally, was nearly unprecedented. Moreover, for Russians, the island of Cuba was as exotic as Tahiti, a promised land of white sand beaches and dusky girls. Ramius knew differently. He had read articles in Red Star and other state journals about the joys of duty in Cuba. He had also been there. Ramius changed cards in his hands. He had given them the good news. Comrades, officers, and men of Red October, now the bad news that everyone was waiting for. This mission will not be an easy one. It demands our best efforts. We must maintain absolute radio silence and our operating routines must be perfect. Rewards only come to those who truly earn them. Every officer and every man aboard, from your commanding officer to the newest matros, must do his socialist duty and do it well. If we work together as comrades, as the new Soviet men we are, we shall succeed. You young comrades new to the sea, listen to your officers, to your Mekmania, and to your Stashini. Learn your duties well, and carry them out exactly. There are no small jobs on this ship, no small responsibilities. Every comrade depends for his life upon every other. Do your duty, follow your orders, and when we have completed this voyage, you will be true Soviet sailors. That is all. Ramius released his thumb from the mic switch and set it back in the cradle. Not a bad speech, he decided. A large carrot and a small stick. In the galley aft, a petty officer was standing still, holding a warm loaf of bread and looking curiously at the bulkhead-mounted speaker. That wasn't what their orders were supposed to be, was it? Had there been a change in plans? The Mi'kmaq pointed him back to his duties, grinning and chuckling at the prospect of a week in Cuba. He had heard a lot of stories about Cuba and Cuban women and was looking forward to seeing if they were true. In the control room, Ramius mused. I wonder if any American submarines are about. Indeed, comrade Captain. Captain, nodded Captain Second Rank Borodin, who had the watch. Shall we engage the Caterpillar? Proceed, comrade. Engines all stop, Borodin ordered. All stop. The quartermaster, a Starshina petty officer, dialed the annunciator to the stop position. An instant later, the order was confirmed by the inner dial, and a few seconds after that, the dull rumble of the engines died away. Borodin picked up the phone and punched the button for engineering. Comrade Chief Engineer, prepare to engage the Caterpillar. It wasn't the official name for the new drive system. It had no name as such, just a project number. The nickname Caterpillar had been given it by a young engineer who had been involved in the sub's development. Neither Ramius nor Borodin knew why, but as often happens with such names, it had stuck. Ready, Comrade Borodin? The chief engineer reported back in a moment. Open doors fore and aft, Borodin ordered next. The Mi'kmaq of the watch reached up the control board and threw 4 switches. The status light over each changed from red to green. Doors show open, comrade. Engage Caterpillar. Build speed slowly to 13 knots. Build slowly to 13 knots, comrade, the engineer acknowledged. The hull, which had gone momentarily silent, now had a new sound. The engine noises were lower and very different from what they had been. The reactor plant noises, mainly from pumps that circulated the cooling water, were almost imperceptible. The Caterpillar did not use a great deal of power for what it did. At the Mi'kmaq station, the speed gauge, which had dropped to 5 knots, began to creep upward again. Forward of the missile room, in a space shoehorned into the crew's accommodations, the handful of sleeping men stirred briefly in their bunks as they noted an intermittent rumble aft and the hum of electric motors a few feet away, separated from them by the pressure hull. They were tired enough even on their first day at sea to ignore the noise, fighting back to their precious allotment of sleep. Caterpillar functioning normally, comrade Captain, Borodin reported. Excellent. Steer 260 helm, Ramius ordered. 260, comrade? The helmsman turned his wheel to the left. The USS Bremerton. 30 miles to the northeast, the USS Bremerton was on a heading of 225, just emerging from under the ice pack. A 688 class attack submarine, She had been on an ELINT, electronic intelligence gathering, mission in the Kara Sea when she was ordered west to the Kola Peninsula. The Russian missile boat wasn't supposed to have sailed for another week, and the Bremerton skipper was annoyed at this latest intelligence screw-up. He would have been in place to track the Red October if she had sailed as scheduled. Even so, the American sonar men had picked up on the Soviet sub a few minutes earlier, despite the fact that they were traveling at 14 knots. Con? Sonar? Commander Wilson lifted the phone. Con, aye. Contact lost, sir. His screws stopped a few minutes ago and have not restarted. There's some other activity to the east, but the missile sub has gone dead. Very well, he's probably settling down to a slow drift. We'll be creeping up on him. Stay awake, Chief. Commander Wilson thought this over as he took 2 steps to the chart table. The 2 officers of the Fire Control Tracking Party, who had just been establishing their track for the contact, looked up to learn their commander's opinion. If it was me, I'd go down near the bottom and circle slowly right about here. Wilson traced a rough circle on the chart that enclosed the Red October's position. So let's creep up on him. We'll reduce speed to 5 knots and see if we can move in and reacquire him from his reactor plant noise. Wilson turned to the officer of the deck. Reduce speed to 5 knots. Aye, Skipper. Severomorsk, USSR. In the central post office building in Severomorsk, a mail sorter watched sourly as a truck driver dumped a large canvas sack on his work table and went back out the door. He was late. Well, not really late, the clerk corrected himself, since the idiot had not been on time once in 5 years. It was a Saturday, and he resented being at work. Only a few years before, the 40-hour week had been started in the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, this change had never affected such vital public services as mail delivery. So, here he was, still working a 6-day week, and without extra pay. A disgrace, he thought, and had said often enough in his apartment, playing cards with his workmates over vodka and cucumbers. He untied the drawstring and turned the sack over. Several smaller bags tumbled out. There was no sense in hurrying. It was only the beginning of the month, and they still had weeks to move their quota of letters and parcels from one side of the building to the other. In the Soviet Union, every worker is a government worker, and they have a saying, as long as the bosses pretend to pay us, we will pretend to work. Opening a small mail bag, he pulled out an official-looking envelope addressed to the main political administration of the Navy in Moscow. The clerk paused, fingering the envelope. It probably came from one of the submarines based at Polyarnia, on the other side of the fjord. What did the letter say? The sorter wondered, playing the mental game that amused mailmen all over the world. Was it an announcement that all was ready for the final attack on the imperialist West? A list of party members who were late paying their dues, or a requisition for more toilet paper? There was no telling. Submariners, they were all prima donnas. Even the farm boy conscripts still picking shit from between their toes paraded around like members of the party elite. The clerk was 62. In the Great Patriotic War, he had been a tank rider serving in a Guards tank corps attached to Konev's First Ukrainian Front. That, he told himself, was a man's job, riding into action on the back of the great battle tanks, leaping off to hunt for the German infantrymen as they cowered in their holes. When something needed doing against those slugs, it was done. Now what had become of Soviet fighting men, living aboard luxury liners with plenty of good food and warm beds? The only warm bed he had ever known was over the exhaust vent of his tank's diesel. And he'd had to fight for that. It was crazy what the world had become. Now sailors acted like czarist princes and wrote tons of letters back and forth and called it work. These pampered boys didn't know what hardship was. And their privileges. Every word they committed to paper was priority mail. Whimpering letters to their sweethearts, most of it, and here he was sorting through it all on a Saturday to see that it got to their womenfolk, even though they couldn't possibly have a reply for 2 weeks. It just wasn't like the old days. The sorter tossed the envelope with a negligent flick of the wrist towards the surface mail bag for Moscow on the far side of his work table. It missed, dropping to the concrete floor. The letter would be placed aboard the train a day late. The sorter didn't care. There was a hockey game that night, the biggest game of the young season, Central Army against Wings. He had a liter of vodka bet on Wings. Morrow, England. Halsey's greatest popular success was his greatest error. In establishing himself as a popular hero with legendary aggressiveness, the Admiral would blind later generations to his impressive intellectual abilities and a shrewd gambler's instinct to... Jack Ryan frowned at his computer. It sounded too much like a doctoral dissertation, and he had already done one of those. He thought of dumping the whole passage from the memory disk, but decided against it. He had to follow this line of reasoning for his introduction. Bad as it was, it did serve as a guide for what he wanted to say. Why was it that introductions always seemed to be the hardest part of a history book? For 3 years now, he had been working on Fighting Sailor, an authorized biography of Fleet Admiral William Halsey. Nearly all of it was contained on a half-dozen floppy disks lying next to his Apple computer. "Daddy," Ryan's daughter was staring up at him. "And how's my little Sally today?" "Fine." Ryan picked her up and set her on his lap, careful to slide his chair away from the keyboard. Sally was all checked out on games and educational programs, and occasionally thought that this meant she was able to handle WordStar also. Once that had resulted in the loss of 20,000 words of electronically recorded manuscript. And a spanking. She leaned her head against her father's shoulder. "You don't look fine. What's bothering my little girl?" "Well, Daddy, you see, it's almost Christmas, and I'm not sure that Santa knows where we are. We're not where we were last year." "Oh, I see. And you're afraid he doesn't come here?" "Uh-huh." "Why didn't you ask me before? Of course he comes here. Promise." "Promise?" "Promise." "Okay." She kissed her father and ran out of the room, back to watching cartoons on the telly, as they called it in England. Ryan was glad she had interrupted him. He didn't want to forget to pick up a few things when he flew over to Washington. Where was... Oh, yeah. He pulled a disk from his desk drawer and inserted it in the spare disk drive. After clearing the screen, he scrolled up the Christmas list, things he still had to get. With a simple command, a copy of the list was made on the adjacent printer. Ryan tore the page off and tucked it in his wallet. Work didn't appeal to him this Sunday morning. He decided to play with his kids. After all, he'd be stuck in Washington for much of the coming week. The V.K. Konovalov. The Soviet submarine V.K. Konovalov crept above the hard sand bottom of the Barents Sea at 3 knots. She was at the southwest corner of grid square 5490, and for the past 10 hours had been drifting back and forth on a north-south line, waiting for the red October to arrive for the beginning of exercise October Frost. Captain second-rank Viktor Alexeyevich Tupolev placed slowly around the periscope pedestal in the control room of his small, fast attack sub. He was waiting for his old mentor to show up, hoping to play a few tricks on him. He had served with the schoolmaster for 2 years. They had been good years, and while he found his former commander to be something of a cynic, especially about the party, he would unhesitatingly testify to Ramius's skill and craftiness. And his own. Tupolev, now in his 3rd year of command, had been one of the schoolmaster's star pupils. His current vessel was a brand new Alpha, the fastest submarine ever made. A month earlier, While Ramius had been fitting out the Red October after her initial shakedown, Tupolev and 3 of his officers had flown down to see the model sub that had been the test bed for the prototype drive system. 32 meters long and diesel-electric powered, it was based in the Caspian Sea, far from the eyes of imperialist spies, and kept in a covered dock, hidden from their photographic satellites. Ramius had had a hand in the development of the Caterpillar, and Tupolev recognized the mark of the master. It would be a bastard to detect. Not quite impossible, though. After a week of following the model around the north end of the Caspian Sea in an electrically powered launch, trailing the best passive sonar array his country had yet made, he thought he had found a flaw. Not a big one, just big enough to exploit. Of course, there was no guarantee of success. He was not only in competition with a machine, but also with the captain commanding her. Tupolev knew this area intimately. The water was almost perfectly isothermal. There was no thermal layer for a submarine to hide under. They were far enough from the freshwater rivers on the north coast of Russia not to have to worry about pools and walls of variable salinity interfering with their sonar searches. The Konovalov had been built with the best sonar systems the Soviet Union had yet produced, copied closely from the French DUUV-23 and a bit improved, the factory technician said. Tupolev planned to mimic the American tactic of drifting slowly, with just enough speed to maintain steerage, perfectly quiet and waiting for the Red October to cross his path. He would then trail his quarry closely and log each change in course and speed, so that when they compared logs in a few weeks, the schoolmaster would see that his erstwhile student had played his own winning game. It was about time someone did. Anything new on sonar? Tupolev was getting tense. Patience came hard to him. Nothing new, comrade captain. The star palm tapped the X on the chart that marked the position of the Rokossovskaya, a Delta-class missile sub they had been tracking for several hours in the same exercise area. Our friend is still cruising in a slow circle. Do you think that Rokossovskaya might be trying to confuse us? Would Captain Ramius have arranged for him to be here to complicate our task? The thought had occurred to Tupolev. Perhaps, but probably not. This exercise was arranged by Koroff himself. Our mission orders were sealed, and Marco's orders should have been also, but then Admiral Koroff is an old friend of our Marco. Tupolev paused for a moment and shook his head. No, Koroff is an honorable man. I think Ramius is proceeding this way as slowly as he can, to make us nervous, to make us question ourselves. He will know we are to hunt him and will adjust his plans accordingly. He might try to enter the square from an unexpected direction, or to make us think that he is. You have never served under Ramius, comrade lieutenant. He is a fox, that one, an old grey-whiskered fox. I think we will continue to patrol as we are for another 4 hours. If we have not yet acquired him then, we will cross over to the southeast corner of the square, and work our way into the center. Yes. Tupolev had never expected that this would be easy. No attack submarine commander had ever embarrassed Ramius. He was determined to be the first, and the difficulty of the task would only confirm his own prowess. In 1 or 2 more years, Tupolev planned to be the new master.